levels, and which guidelines I would imagine then follow thereafter. And secondly, interest, there's been a lot, what kind of partnerships, this is really affects everyone, vulnerable, all segments of demographics, and it's here to stay. And hopefully we'll find mitigation practices in very densely populated cities. How the private sector can get involved in, and I commend your work in the Red Cross and all the different entities involved, how the private sector can get involved, especially on the awareness campaign, and how we can perhaps help the most vulnerable, which I'm hearing today is the elderly and the homeless. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. The first question was about the categorization. As we said, as I said before, we have 4 categories. It's not, the categories are not direct. Not from state, but from the private sector. So private sector can help science, for example, to on the infrastructure we need to do our job and collect data that are necessary for us, but also for people, but also to support other stakeholders like the first responders that they need support also from private sector to do their job. But I think in Greece, we have to strengthen this link between research and the private sector and how we can support our work, because state is not very helpful and supportive in that extent.
Yeah, with many competing priorities in a post-COVID world with many demands, inflation, it's just one of the many things on the list, but we know we have to prepare now for the future. Do you want to talk about stakeholders as well, Elena, in the private sector?
Yeah, I've got 2 things. Stakeholder engagement has been a big push for our program in South Australia. We've only recently, for the first time, got a corporate partner just for the next 12 months, at least as a trial. They're actually a health insurance provider in Australia, but they're really keen to be a part of the change in dynamic with where they put their money, when to put their volunteers. So for the next 12 months, they're supporting both our Telecross Ready program in South Australia, but they're also helping to fund the exact same program to be created in Queensland, so the north of the country, and help them get off the ground. So that's a new, even for us, that's 12 years to have a corporate partner really keen to be a part of the change in dynamic and where they put in their money and where they put in their corporate sponsors. So that also what comes with the money is corporate sponsors. So they will have a contract that a number of staff within their own department will actually volunteer to make calls whenever we're activated. They'll either come to our office conveniently then around the corner from us, so we can go to them, and they'll make actually calls on hot weather days as a volunteer, which is new for us, and it's giving us lots of ideas moving forward of other partners and stakeholders in the private sector that we've probably never approached before. One of the other partnerships we've had for the last 2 years is working with our Bureau of Meteorology, so our equivalent of the Science Guy, and because they were developing new ways of messaging, so new early warning systems, but they actually have changed the way they calculate and declare a heat wave across the country. So we've divided them, each state and country is divided up into little smaller districts, and they actually assess the excess heat for that particular region at that particular time of the year. So what is normal for them at that particular time of the year, and even from the start of summer to the end of summer. So what they might declare a heat wave in December for us, so early summer for us, might be a little bit lower because it's a bit of a shock to the system, basically. We were just coming to the first hot weather, but they might not call it for the exact same temperature in the end of February, where we've had 3 months of hot weather. People have had time to acclimatise to the heat. So they won't call it for the exact same, like it might be 36. They might call it in December, but in February, it'd have to be 40 before they call it, because people have had time to adjust. Because in South Australia, just for our state, the temperature can change from the north of the state. It might be, they're used to 38, 40 degree days, closer to the desert, basically. But the very bottom of our state, anything over 30, and people are suffering because they never have hot weather. It's like the difference between is only 6 hours, but the huge difference. So they won't call a heat wave for the whole state because the impacts and the temperature difference is so extreme. And that's just South Australia. It's a pretty big country.
Go for it.
One other key stakeholder that we have been engaging with more recently is a Humanitech startup. And it's a group of amazing humans called Climasons, who are actually developing a tool that overlays that excess heat factor data with a whole variety of vulnerability criteria. So the data that was mentioned and needing to have access to it is really key in this tool. It has about 12 different layers of data that can be sort of compiled together, including age, disability, socioeconomic range, a whole variety of different availability of green space, and it can actually get taken down to the square kilometre on finding where the most vulnerable people are in an area. So without the availability of that data, a tool like that wouldn't be able to exist. And that has massive implications for the work that we do with our program and what other emergency services can do, because we can actually go and target the people who will be feeling that the most based on data that we have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really helpful, really interesting. Other questions? Yeah.
On this point, how private sector, but all workplaces can affect the quality of their people, of their staff, is a change in a shift in culture. Now we have COVID that made us, that gave us like an excuse or the means to work from home. Heat waves is something that would just like, if we are bold enough to just accept the new framework of work. People can work from home. People can limit movement in the city, which creates extra problem, extra temperatures, extra heat circulation. Obviously, exposure, exactly. So obviously it needs to be balanced with, we need the physical presence to the offices and so on. And a second example is from the nutritional programs that have been like very popular the last 10 years. A lot of companies, they promote fruits, vegetables, or other scientifically proposed sort of better diet. The same is with hydration. The same is with like the culture of how we dress to work. Like like men for many years. I'm just like not. They had to wear like long trousers, long. It's a sort of something that doesn't make any sense anymore. So these things are less because we have a culture of data. We know now we have the capacity to build like algorithms to collect data from mobiles and do a very nice and targeted interventions. But then again, there is a wider sort of approach that has to do with the way we see things before we even get to the data, giving the people the chance to have water, to stay home, to respond to like the reality. It's for me, it's important to keep like reality as we experience it and not going to the reality only through data. That's something that
Fantastic. Yeah. I need a mic runner.
Thank you. And thank you all for the presentations. Really, really very interesting. I have questions for everybody, but I'll try to, yeah, let's go synthetically. I had a follow-up question to Dr. Lagovardos on the level of alert on these 4 levels. How do you advertise? How do you sort of raise awareness in the population on what level are we currently? I understand now we are at 0, so no need to advertise it, but should it be 2 in a couple of weeks? How do you let the population know? And I'm thinking about this because we work a lot with the refugee communities here in Athens and around the country as UNHCR. And we try as much as possible to engage refugee communities in spreading information about what are the main risks and how we can work with them to address them. So an information like this one would be very useful to then disseminate and for them to further disseminate in the communities. And then I had, a bit of a more niche question. I was very impressed by the graph that you showed that in the last slide with the days of excess heat. And I wondered if you remember what was the benchmark. Does it change every year or depending on the average temperature, or this number of days in which it was hotter than the rest of the year? Was it in comparison to a set temperature like 38?
No, it's not. I will start with the second question. No, it's not. It was a number of hours every summer, for every summer. It's the sum of these hours when we exceed the 99% of the distribution, which is something like a certain number that is not on the ground. It's a little bit higher because it's better to do it on a little bit higher from the ground. And then it's the same threshold for all years. Some years the number of hours is small or even 0, a very mild summer. And some summer it's very hot. We do not see a specific trend. We had also in the past very hot summers. The exception was the last summer when you see the last bar was extremely high. It was 240 hours. That means almost 10 days, not necessarily consecutive, but 10 full days during last summer. We have an extreme behavior of temperature over Athens. Okay. For the first one, the only way we have as scientists to pass information is to use our webpage. We have a weather page, which is very popular in Greece. We have more than 400,000 visitors per day. And we have this specific warning but it's not enough. It's Meteorology, but it's not enough. Yes. But of course, it can be seen only for people that are visiting this specific webpage. Also, the city of Athens has a link because we made that with the city of Athens on their webpage. But as you understand, webpage of a city is not very popular in general because the information is not something vital to how many times have you visited your town's. Okay. But another way is to convince the media that this information has to pass to the media. In some cases, they're doing that. For example, 2 weeks ago, when we first announced this and we have a category 1 heat wave, many mainstream media news media, especially sites that is digital media, reproduce this information. That tomorrow, for example, for Athens, but we have to make the next step and to do it nationwide. Okay? Because you have the criticism that to focus only on the capital of Athens. Okay, this is good, but on the other hand, you can say that it's a big city, so the problem is much worse than a big city. But you have to expand it on others, and the private sector can help on that. Okay.
Maybe just to, let's go over there and just to say on the, how do we get the message out about the levels and the risk? That's something that we're talking about as the Red Cross. How can we use our tools, our communication tools, our social media tools to disseminate the risk when it reaches certain thresholds, but also then the response options that are available to people so that we can offer an impact-based response. And I have a secret dream of Viber stickers that give you the heat wave level that you could send to your friends. That's a dream that may or may not ever be realized. But I think we have to be creative because, as Costa said, that people aren't necessarily going to their town website to find out if they should be worried about a heat wave. And we need to find out other creative ways to reach vulnerable people. And Red Cross volunteers are another source. They go door to door. They are out in the streets. They're talking to people. And that's going back to the offline, old school way of pressing messages. Yeah.
People know that the heat wave is coming, of course, but they don't, in general, but they don't know the categorization because there's a big difference between 0 and 2.
Yeah, and they don't know the threat, the risk that's associated with it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I wanted just to add up with Costa. So I was just I wanted to add that what is important is that this categorization of heat waves is just a pilot for Athens, and it is the first time that this has been created for a city with such a large urban development in Greece. And our vision is to expand this effort to other cities of Greece, but also everywhere, because it's not only the people who are living in cities who suffer from heat waves, but also people who are working in the fields, in the farms, in the construction. And so there is a lot of impact, and then there is a challenge that has been said before to pass from the forecast of a heat wave to the impact that may this heat wave have on different types of population, which with the exposure to this heat wave might be more or less vulnerable. People who are older, or people who are more vulnerable in terms of their heat condition, health condition, and so on. So it's something that is within what we want to do and within our vision, but we are taking it step by step. So we're trying to find also the financing to do so if this first effort and pilot case is successful, which we think it is. But another challenge also is the way that this information and this forecast is communicated to various, to different levels or in the community. Because as Costa said, we have a very successful website, but this is for the general public, which does not necessarily include all the vulnerable people. That is why we need the contact and the collaboration with organizations such as your organization, because you have access to vulnerable people. So we are not obliged to contact, not obliged, not the correct word, sorry. It's not our, we cannot access, it's not our role, we cannot access them, but what we can access is you. I mean, we can access the organizations who are the first respondents, and they can use this important information to help the vulnerable people.
Exactly.
So this is the collaboration where targeting
the power of partnership. Exactly.
And of course to go nationwide, and also create the good practice that might be also used in other countries in our neighborhood. And that's it.
Thank you.
I would like to go back to this diagram. I was refrained before to do it, but now that we brought it back, if I got it right, the days of extra heat are compared to the yearly average, so they need to be on the distribution. No, so it's a distribution of.
And let's say the 1%.
Percent. Exactly. Yeah. For that year. For the whole 10 years. Okay, that's good.
Top 1% of temperature, which is the top 1% of highest temperatures. And we measure the number of hours that exceed or that belong in this top 1% of high temperatures.
These are some serious data people over here. You guys need to know this.
No, because I was wondering there are no negative.
That's not the top 1% high temperature.
Yeah.
There was no year with negative anyway hours, so always it's above. The other thing is I was wondering if it was like based per year, it would have been the case of having a cold year with many hot days, but like this description. Okay, now it's clear. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. We're diving deep. Last question, I think, for the grand finale. Then our friends online can hear.
Thank you very much for all the interesting insights. I have a more operational question for the professor. When it comes to heat wave and extreme weather conditions, Greece, we are talking about civil protection. Okay, that's the first responders in the country. That's it also at EU level. How about further operationalizing 112 to include further awareness and outreach for vulnerable groups, but also for the whole population for heat waves? It was very much successfully done for the pandemic, also for the earthquakes and the devastating fires of last year. Why not? Because I know 112 was very much in delay activated in our country, and it was done thanks to a very powerful partnership at EU level, but also at private level. How about discussing at scientific level, you, the academia, with Mr. Stylianidis, the climate change ministry, to make 112 further inclusive? Push notifications through Viber and 112 messages. This is awareness, and this is outreach.
But the problem we have in Greece, and I have pinpointed that in many cases, speaking to the media, is that still a gap of collaboration between the operational and the scientific entities. We are trying to convince them that we have information, vital information to provide, not only for heat, but for other things. And this can be done in some cases, we have an extreme heat, for example, through 112 to make this. But they are reluctant to use the new tools and the new information that if we accept from the earthquakes, all the other hazards are weather related.
Yes.
So my field of science is on the key because I'm a meteorologist.
Yes.
For forest fires, for everything, weather is behind that. And we are trying to convince them that today, the tools we have for forecasting to observe the weather are much, much better than in the past. We are not 100% perfect. It's impossible. And they do not understand that. It's a big problem. We can provide vital information for forest fires, for heavy rainfall, for heat wave, and they are not willing to use it. Hopefully, media, as I told you speaking before, reproduce this information we provide from our page, and so the audience receive this information. But it's not made by the state; it's made by the news sector, the media sector. It's something good. We need that.
Yes.
But we have to make a further step and convince the state that has to use this information. I think that through the pressure we have, through the media, they will understand that.
Yes. Also, perhaps through EU channels, because it happens, I come from that sector of emergency response of the European Commission. They work hand in hand with GRC, the Joint Research Center. Emergency response goes hand in hand with scientific analysis. Exactly. So why not to promote your work through the Joint Research Center? They might be more inclined to come closer to you that way.
for example, the best way to do that is that the civil protection has a permanent staff by meteorologists and scientific staff that support them on a daily basis. Not only to come and speak 15 minutes and leave, to be there, especially during forest fires, when you need information on time, to analyze data on the spot, to take data from satellites and from other sensors and to give the information. You need to have this task force on the premises of civil protection working together. This does not exist. This is a huge gap.
This is how the Emergency Response Center in the European Commission work. They have seconded national experts from all the member states, each one of them with their own specialization. Someone on maritime, someone on forest fires, soil erosion, etc. So it's just mirroring the existing model at national level.
Interesting. We have one final question because Naz gets the last word.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity. So thanks for the, thanks for the talks. It was great. I think, Dr. Kostas, you mentioned something about the data on the mortality rate as a result of heat, which you said is probably not accurate. But is there any data out there on people who fall ill as a result of heat? And if there is that data, follow-up question, where can we find this to target these people so they don't actually, the situation doesn't escalate? So one thing you mentioned about, so I work for the Red Cross as well, so maybe our vulnerability list that we have, but there might be other sources as well. So I don't know, we learned also from Australian Red Cross from how they target, but here in Greece.
What we did was we worked only on mortality data. We collected data from a statistical service in Greece, and for the last 20 years, we trained that algorithm to see how high temperatures correlate to mortality rate. So we can see how the exceedance of temperature goes to exceedance of mortality. But you said something about not for dead people, for illness.
People who access.
No, we don't have this data. It's very difficult to find this data in Greece. Hopefully, statistical service was good to provide, not related. They gave us only the total number of deaths per day, not related to heat. We understand by shot that which is the exceedance when we have there is no say
the fact that even on illnesses, but also on deaths, you never there will never write on your death certificate he or she has been dead from heat or excessive heat. So the data we have been working on is to find out if during the heat wave days, you have excessive mortality compared to non-heat wave days. And this is the way to find out. So that is why we cannot have any data, I think, about illnesses caused by mortality. And here we come to something which is very important, is the way that various situations are also reported. I think now that we are going to more and more data about illnesses, mortality, and so on should be more specific. The way of reporting becomes more than ever important because now we have more data and we can correlate those data and derive the conclusions. But what if you go to a hospital, for example, and the illnesses are reported in the medical way only and not considering the fact that those data might be very important for other scientific areas, which is the relation about, let's say, health and heat waves or other subjects that have been mentioned before. So I think that scientists will have an important role here to improve the way that everything is being reported. This is, and if we manage to do that, then we will derive better conclusions and we will help make things better for our lives, for our security, and for everything.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on, recognizing that it's warm and that you've all been generous with your time and your engagement, but that there is work we can do and to make it better for everyone and to have a positive impact. So thank you for that beautiful closing thought. I think we've heard a few things. We heard that this climate threat is real, it is present, it is local, and it is global. And it is affecting people in an unequal way, be that the poorest communities outside of Europe or the poorest communities here in Athens. And that injustice is just one of those further signs of the injustice of climate change and its impact on people. I think we've heard that data is key, that we have to have solid data. We have to really leverage the amazing evolution of forecasts and impact-based forecasting to be better prepared and to be better able to respond, but that there's more data gaps and more data needs, and these data people are going to figure it out. And I think we've heard about the power of partnerships, the importance of working with different stakeholders, different levels of government, those that have the data and the science and the forecasts, and those that have the grassroots volunteers at the front lines that are ready to respond, that know where people congregate in times of heat waves. And we know that we need that connection to communities, to those most vulnerable, and that we need to make sure that they aren't forgotten, that they aren't without support, and that we're connecting them with the information about the risks and the services that are out there. So I want to thank you all panelists for being here. You're amazing. Thank you. And to thank you all for being in the room today, for coming on this hot day, and those online and those watch this after the fact. I'm sure there's many people online right now, no, but they'll watch it later. For joining us, for listening, for engaging, and really just for being part of this important conversation. This is not an issue that's going away. And I think together we can have an impact, and we can save lives, make life a little bit less hard for those most vulnerable, but we have work to do. So get to work, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.